COVID-19 has really been a topical issue for a while now. In the last presentation we did on COVID-19, we looked at the chronology of events since the outbreak from January last year and the strides the mining companies have made so far. It was revealed that a lot of acquisitions, measures, and then expansions were made throughout that year. We need to go a step further, still interrogate what that wide spread pandemic has brought to the fore. Are we going to see any change in the industry, or are we still going to remain in this status? We've asked to do that today is Akwasi Boahene. He's the head of Fidelity Securities, in charge of a large and huge portfolio in Ghana. He's actually a mining engineer with over 14 years experience in investment banking. Because he has an MBA in finance and also an MSc in finance with a BSc in mining engineering. He's going to look at the opportunities we can get out of the COVID, also the inherent risk. He's going to expose us to all those risks. For that, he's a member of the WAIMM. He's also a global chartered management accountant and a fellow of CIMA. I think we've overspent our welcome. I will invite Akwasi to the floor if he's ready. LB, if you can take over if you are ready.
Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you, Mr. President. Just a minute, and then I'll just.
Loud and clear.
So thank you. Yes, thank you. So last year we had some brief on the impact of COVID. It was still unfolding, and at that time there was a bit of chaos in the whole world. Both industry, societies, countries were all affected, and was the first of the kind. We were not sure what would happen. A year down the line, it subsides a bit, but there are still some sort of impacts. For instance, India, Asia, and then Europe, they are coming out. America, they also come out. Africa, thankfully, we've also come out of it, but still not over it. It's still not very clear, but at least far better than last year. So the agenda for today is that we'll do just a recap of what we talked about last year, a bit of the impact on the various sectors of societies and then countries, and then also maybe regional areas as well. And after 1 year, are there any opportunities and risk for the industry? We also look at the impact on the industry as a whole, and then see what we can do better. Even though largely the industry were not so significantly affected compared to others. Others, it was chaos. The tourism industry, hospitality, it wasn't easy. But by and large, with the mining industry, it seems that it was fairly okay compared to the others. And they also look at way forward. There are certain factors that contributed to the mining industry not being so hit. So what we are going to say is that what happens if those factors don't go in our favor again, if something should happen again. So the whole idea is that yes, there's been a pandemic, it's hit some sectors heavily, some sectors were not very hit, but then doesn't mean that we'll lose our guard. What measures can we put in place to ensure that in the future, when there's any pandemic or any factor that impacts on our operations, we'll be in a better position to deal with it. And then we will take some concluding thoughts. So yes, I mean, last year it was very clear that if you look at the tourism industry, aviation, even oil and gas, automobile, they're all affected to a very large extent, because once we had a health emergency affecting every part of the world, there were restrictions, state of emergencies in almost every country, restrictions, we couldn't move. And if we can't move, it means that planes are grounded, borders were closed. It had an impact on the automobile industry. People were not going to view sites in other countries. Tourism was affected. Hospitality, hotels were struggling. So it was a very, very big issue for some of these sectors, even for consumer products. Yes, we realized that they have to change their business model. They have to now sell online, and shops were being emptied. I mean, there was panic all around. So, I mean, this was a very big issue for almost every country because there was so much panic. And over the years, we realized that there have been easing of restrictions. Borders have now been reopened. People are now moving about. So at least we've seen that some sectors are picking up. And I must add that if you look at some sectors, I'll give just a brief example. The recovery has been slow. Others have likened it to somehow far. For example, other recovery, they compare the recovery of sectors with that of economies. For example, others are saying that some sectors, the recovery is L, meaning that your production or revenue dipped down, and then you expect that it comes up. It hasn't gone back to the pre-pandemic levels. So it's now flat. So it's an L. It dropped drastically. Maybe your output or revenue dropped about 80%, and it hasn't come back. So it's still down there. You are not trying to recover. Others, they are saying is W. It goes down and up and down again. Other sectors was a V. It went down and picked up. As you can see, some sectors like mining, it just went down briefly and then picked up again in terms of prices of certain metals. So because of social distancing measures and all that, we couldn't have all the workforce on site and still deliver our usual output or production. And that was a bit of concern for everyone. Now, interestingly enough, mining plays a key role in every country. So though there were lockdowns, for when it comes to the mining sector, they were given some sort of leeway to still operate, so that at least it doesn't impact on their production. So if you look at certain countries, for Angola, the country was locked down for about 44 days, but then depending on the severity or impact of the pandemic on that particular country, others had to halt operations entirely. So in Angola, the major diamond mines, yes, some of them had to suspend or halt operations for that matter. The same was for Botswana. For Burkina Faso, there was a partial impact. No, it was a partial impact in terms of their operation. It wasn't off entirely. In Ghana, operations wasn't impacted, though we had there was a lockdown for a period of 3 weeks. The mining companies were still operating, but then they had to ensure that they go by all the protocols, safety protocols, to ensure that the staff are safe. And so by and large, if you look at generally in the industry, you'd realize that it was mixed. Though there were lockdowns, at least, yes, some did halt operations, others was partial, and then others, they operated fully, as in the case of Ghana. So that was a bit of a plus. I mean, this is prices of some of the metals, and this is looking at first quarter of 2020 and that of 2019 in terms of the change. If you look at it, generally it was under 10%. And even for South Africa, platinum, there was an issue in one of the mining sites. That's why you can see the 17%. So largely for first quarter 2020 compared to 2019, the change, though that time you realized that the pandemic has taken off and then hitting many countries, we didn't see that significant drop in terms of prices. And if you look at it from October, looking at 1 year, October 2019, right down to October 2020, yes, it started in China, the pandemic from December 2019. So prices were fairly flat. By March, the impact was severe across the world. So between March and October and April, we can see a bit of a drop, and it reflected for all the metals. There was uncertainty on the markets. People were not quite sure what could happen. China was now also coming out. It had dealt with the pandemic and then coming out of the woods. So if you realize, by the second quarter, China was recovering, and you could see the impact. Prices of all these metals started to pick up a bit. And as you can see, right down from April to December, you could see that some were even higher than the pre-pandemic levels. And that really tells a story that China is the largest consumer of these metals. So if China picks up, it means that we are in a position to reposition our business and still deliver. But the question is, what if China has suffered for 9 or 10 months, what would have been the impact? So you can see that, yes, China's recovery did benefit the mining industry significantly. But the question for us that going forward, what if it was the reverse? So yes, we have benefited from that particular recovery by China, but what happens if it had been worse? If China had that same experience like the US or UK, whereby they couldn't contain the virus, how will it have affected us? And these are some of the scenarios that maybe as an industry, we may have to be looking at and then telling ourselves that if it becomes worse, how can we reposition ourselves to ensure that we won't be found wanting like what the other companies in other sectors did experience? This was for copper, the same thing. Yes, initially before, right on from 2019, you realize that from January to about March, we saw the dip. By the second quarter, when China was recovering, you could see the same trend. Yes, going up way above the prices were way above the pre-pandemic levels. If you look at production or output, as you can see, now we're comparing the global crisis to COVID-19. It was very severe. I mean, when there was a meltdown, the whole global economy started from the US, Europe was also affected. Some banks went down. We could see. If you look at COVID, which was very severe, as you can see, you look at China, you look at the OECD countries and non-OECD, you can see you can see how China recovered and then which has impacted positively on all of us. But the question is, what if China also struggled for a long period of time? How would we have responded to it? So I think it's a question that should be on our minds and see how we can have these scenarios and see how through stress testing, scenario plan, see how we can react when issues of this nature happen. Because today is a health issue. Tomorrow it might be, we don't know, it will be an economic issue, a financial issue, maybe an earthquake, anything. So I think that is what should be on our minds. Now, are there possibly any opportunities owing to disruption by COVID? Because out of every situation, we should be able to see whether we can take advantage of the opportunities. So we don't only look at opportunities, but look at also risks as well, so that at least our companies will be future ready and can deal with any other issues that may come our way should we go for it. So we have some few opportunities here. The first one is strategic partnerships, long-term. By that we mean long-term partnerships that are not transactional. That is when I need something, I come to you and then that ends. So for example, supply relationship should be strategic so that when there are issues like COVID, because of my long-term relationship with you, I could still deliver and then not when as and when I need you. So it's very important in terms of our supply relationship, they are strategic. Obviously, not just one supply, you also diversify as well. So that if there are restrictions here and there, it could fall on other suppliers as well. It's absolutely vital. I know with the communities, our industry tends to do a lot with them in terms of the communities. So as usual with the communities, the state agencies and all that, I know a lot of work goes on with them, but at least when anything happens, we always look at how we can really deepen and strengthen that relationship. So we can't lose sight of that as well. And internal stakeholders, it got to a point that we had to reduce the number on site at any point because of, going by the protocols. If you had 50 people working on a shift, you can't have that number. It has to be reduced. But then here, what we are saying is that team members should, the mentality is that we strengthen that partnership. They don't work in silos. No, it's not my job. It's this person's job. It's this department's job. And we work in silos. We collaborate a bit. We look beyond building walls or silos between departments. If we do that, we realize that, yes, we could have small people on site, but then we can still deliver more. So that is also very vital. The other opportunities, previously before COVID, the idea was there, let's invest in IT, invest in tools, so that at least what will happen is that we can have access. We don't need to be present on site all the time. Remotely, we can still pick data remotely. We don't need to be on site to pick certain information. At least once you have these tools, then to a very large extent, we don't need to be on site and still be able to meet our production targets. Now, with COVID, it wasn't an option. You need to reduce the number of people working on a shift. So you are forced to also think of how you can accelerate your IT investment. And every man is different. It depends on what stage you are in terms of investment in IT, but you can't do without it. Now we have issues with declining ore grades. I mean, accessibility of these ore bodies might be a problem because over time, these are finite assets, and over time, you may have to look at ways and means to try and access some of these ore bodies remotely. So these are things that you may have to look out for. The other one is pay more attention to environmental, social, and governance issues. Now, there's a bit of talk when it comes to reducing greenhouse gases. So there'll be, I mean, when you're going for funding on the international market, going for loans, these things will come up. I mean, the assets you use, how well you position yourself to ensure that you reduce carbon emissions? How well, or how do we see your practices? Are they environmentally friendly? And these things are also going to come up. And then interestingly, your power mix, is it just fuel? Is it just fossil fuel? Are you looking at renewable energy? I mean, these are all issues that will come up. And let me also add that, now, even with renewable energy, the interesting thing is that, some of the materials, if that's the new area that all countries are talking about, but the good thing is that some of the metals that we produce, they will be the raw materials that will be used for some of these new power installations, whether it's wind, whether it's solar, whatever it is. I mean, these are things that offers opportunity for mining companies. It might not be for the precious metals, but the base metals, who knows? So these are areas that we could also be looking at. The other one is experience gained. I mean, with the mining companies, safety is high on the agenda. Unlike other industries who struggle, wearing nose masks. I mean, for a mining company, you'll be wearing helmets. I mean, your working life. So adding a nose mask, I mean, and you also wear nose masks already. So it's quite easy to comply. Unlike other sectors where it was quite new, and then we had to struggle wearing masks for 8 hours. But I don't think that was a big problem for the mining industry. But I think that it's an opportunity to try and put together what the learnings were. If you remember, when Ebola hit some other countries, I mean, including that of the mining industry in some countries, I'm sure they picked some few learnings from them. Therefore, when there was COVID, probably they were in a better position to handle. So we believe that once this has happened, we can pick some learnings, and then going forward in the future, we'll be better placed to deal with issues when they come our way. The other thing is that we have to look at our operating model. There's always opportunity to do things better, and then ask ourselves, yes, you are forced to reduce the number that works on a shift because of social distance issues. Then the other question is that, can I just relook at the whole process and see how we can make it more efficient and better? That would also help. The other bit is, how then do we make use of data? It's absolutely vital. How we pick so much data, right down from exploration to extraction of the ore, hauling of it, processing, moving it to the port. Huge data. How well are we using that huge wealth of data in terms of our future decision making? I think that will also be absolutely vital, and then help our companies be future ready, so that at least we are not taken by surprise. Are there any other risk owing to the pandemic? As long as you look at opportunities, there are also other risks we have to deal with. I've just mentioned a few. So if you look at from a legal, financial, or political, you realize that, just a minute. Yeah, so legal, financial, or political. When it started, some laws were passed, emergency ones to deal with issues, restrictions in terms of movement, and then all that, and that did impact on our jobs as well. I mean, people could not fly in, and we had to look at ways and means to ensure that we could still get that kind of service from people who provide some sort of service to us. So it did affect us in a way. If you also look at it from a technical point of view in terms of operations, project execution, yes, we had to tweak it a bit. So there was also some amount of impact about the environmental and social issues. Health and safety was paramount for the workers. I mean, it was very tough. Already you are dealing with other issues, and then you have a pandemic. And then this was something very severe, and you also had to put in measures here and there to ensure that the staff were safe. The other bit was a cyber one, because now we started using remote working tools. You had problems. You could have a cyber attack that could affect your system, and some could more or less have access to your data, which in the end, or virus issue, which could impact on your operations as well. And the other bit was the fact that the pandemic was severe. Some issues were fatal. There was a possibility that some also lost staff as well. So I mean, by and large, these were risks that companies or the industry as a whole had to deal with in the midst of some of the opportunities we did identify. So at least, yes, though there were some opportunities, but also there were risks for the industry to also deal with as well. Now, having looked at the opportunities, having looked at the risks vis-a-vis the risk, the question we may have to ask ourselves is that, how then do we, to a very large extent, put in initiatives which will help us deal with these pandemic when they come our way, especially operating optimally. Normally, when we operate optimally, I know as engineers, we are looking at the best possible solutions. Like well taught in operations research, you try and see how you can minimize cost and then also maximize revenue. So you're looking at the best possible or favorable in the midst of the limitations you have, or options, so that at least you are better placed to deal with these disruptions if they should occur. Like I said, this time is health. Another time it could be financial, it could be economical, it could be legal, it could be anything. But at least if we have a framework or we have certain initiatives in place, should they arise, then we will be in a better place or position to deal with them. Now, I must say that in terms of optimality, we are looking at 4 broad main areas in terms of optimizing our operations. First one is reducing cost. And I think that it goes without saying that once I go for money from banks, from lenders, or owners of the business, once they pump in money, all the key things we'll be looking at is that our margins are very good. So having seen what has happened, how do we then improve our margins? And the key thing here is that you can do that when you reduce your cost, but ensure that you improve processes along the value chain, right down from exploration, extraction, hauling, and then transportation to the port, either the seaport or the airport, depending on the material or the material you are extracting. The other one is improving efficiencies. It's very important. You have a lot of inputs. What are we getting back in return? And it's important how then we complement the competence of the employees or the workers with tools that will make them work faster, quicker. It's absolutely vital that they work faster, they work quicker, because once they do that, you realize that it reflects in terms of your output. It's also very important. So, and then the other bit is increasing productivity, because if productivity goes up, it means, yes, we'll sell more and then take advantage of the prices, which generally on the average tend to rise. So at least once we have, and then that's where the idea about making use of data come into being. How well are we going to utilize assets? Do assets lie idle? The trucks, do they lie idle? How do we bring in some form of how can we improve productivity so that the assets are utilized? So at least we are looking at increasing our utilization rates of these assets, whether they are trucks, whether they are along the value chain, right? Like I said, right down from exploration is sent to the port. So we are looking at improving or increasing our utilization rates of these assets. One. Secondly, as well, ensuring that we minimize breakdown. So in that case, we are looking like using data analytics to ensure that we don't do normally the maintenance should be preventive and not just a normal 3 months waste time. So let's go and do, but then to the extent that it's preventive or predictive maintenance, where we can foretell based on the characteristics and data we pick, which parts, which spares we need to replace, where there's wear and tear, to ensure that we don't have major breakdown on site. To the extent that our system is linked to the supplier, which will trigger an order of a new part or spare to be put on site to replace, so that at least you don't experience a lot of downtimes for that matter. The other bit is enhancing safety as well, and especially people have been making use of virtual reality and some other tools, simulations here and there. I mean, even in training for the staff, I mean, you can simulate certain scenarios, and it makes teaching very easy, so that at least when they are there, they can foresee that if these things happen, how then do I get out of it? And then also others go to the extent of whether they are goggles or whatever, with smartwatches here and there, just to pick certain conditions of the workers, so that at least if there are issues in terms of their health, you can pick it. So in terms of their health, in terms of training, in terms of building their capacity, the other issue is that what kind of tools can we use to ensure that we can improve their safety? So by and large, in terms of optimizing operations, these are the 4 areas that you should be thinking of: reducing your cost. How do I reduce my cost? How do I improve efficiencies? How do I increase productivity? How do I enhance safety? Because the staff, they are one, and they are the most critical assets you have, and then your machines as well. If they can't produce, then it means that we can't hit our targets. And then so just to talk about that. And then the other bit is looking at what kind of initiatives can we then adopt if we are to ensure that we reduce our cost, we enhance safety, and then also we try and gain some efficiencies. The first one is embracing digitalization. Normally when people talk about this, people tend to more or less, people do not distinguish between digitalization and digitization. And I think that what normally happens is that we all tend to do some form of digitization or the other, but we should go beyond digitization and rather focus on digitalization. With digitization, is basically you have manual processes. You want to bring in some sort of, so for example, your data, everything is stored in a manual, you have manual files all over. So all you are doing for digitization is that, well, can we have them in electronic formats? So maybe your exploration data, when it comes to your or handling data, survey data, or mineral processing data. But at least what we are saying is that go beyond that. Digitalization is where you see IT or information technology as an enabler. So it runs through. It's just not about digitizing your manual data and then all that. You go beyond that to see IT as an enabler, whereby teams, units, the firm as a whole, you are looking at how do we ensure that we are efficient? How do we ensure that we are safe? How do we ensure that we pay more? What kind of tools do we need to complement our competencies as human beings or as employees? And that's what we are saying. And with COVID, like we said, if you have to go by certain restrictions, number of people hands are reduced on site. When you have certain tools, they can complement what humans do and still be able to hit or even exceed your production target. So I think that the idea about digitalization should be taken, should be something that should be at the heart of the company. And then maybe gradually, what should happen is that we can't overnight get up and say that we are digitalizing everything, but at least we can start from somewhere and gradually get to a point to the to a point whereby in some other jurisdictions you have a whole mind that it's virtually digitalized. The other bit is driving big data analytics. You know, we talked about how are we making use of data, because the market is so unpredictable that if we have to make certain good judgments, we need to make sense of the data we have. What are the patterns between the numbers, and what is affecting it, whether it's at the regional level, at the national level, or at the global level. And that will inform the kind of decisions you take. So data should be at the center of everything. It should be seen as a currency whereby when we're making decisions, they are a bit scientific. Yes, intuition is also needed, but a bit scientific, backed by the data we have, the insights we have gleaned, and how they are going to help us now decision making. So I think that it will be very key if we should also look at that. The other bit is accelerating innovation. I mean, there's something we need to encourage within departments and within units. It's absolutely vital. How the first one, I mean, innovation should be seen as doing all things differently and doing new things. And especially all things differently would very help, because people are already used to all things. And if they encourage, whether it's a process, whether it's a new equipment, whether big or small, whether at the unit level, at the departmental level, at the organization level, people should be encouraged to do things differently, because that's where you tend to do things better. That's where you tend to gain the efficiencies. That's where you tend to reduce costs. So I think that's very, very important. And then the new things, encouraging new things. And then also, it's also important that as you encourage new things, it's important that team members are trained on basic digital skills, basic, not the advanced one. We are not saying that they should go and learn how to code and all that, the basic ones. And I must add this, you know, there are skills like data visualization. I mean, how nice will it be when you go, you end a shift and everything is visualized, output the day, productivity for the day. You see arrows here and there, increase, decrease, represented by pictures, by colors. So at a glance, you have a clear understanding about what happened in a shift. And not just numbers. At times you're struggling to read through numbers. You just see at a glance, you see pictures, you see graphs, colors here and there, explain. And know when things are visual, they are easier to take in and then appreciate than when they are just numbers and all. So as we take our members through the basics in terms of data visualization, data analysis, those basics, what that happens is that it makes things very easy in terms of decision making, especially not at the strategic level, at maybe managerial level, and then at the operational level as well. And then we're also encouraging that let's try and promote the human-machine collaboration. It's not very easy, because once you are bringing in machines or new tools to help people work, there's a tendency, which is true, that maybe doesn't mean that you are going to reduce the workforce, because that's a question that will also come up. I'm going to use the workforce. That's a big question. But then they should be seen as complementing the work of staff or individuals or employees, so that at least we can improve in terms of our production, in terms of our output, so that even when there are challenges industry-wide, we can still even make more money and then break even worse case scenarios. I must say about the importance of data analytics. Let's say we talked about it. Like I said, you have so much information, very huge, right along the value chain. Absolutely vital. Someone has said that if you want to provide a better oversight of any, whether it's a department, whether it's a company, always think of these three sides. In hindsight, insight, and foresight. And hindsight is it's quite easy. What has happened already? So, and down it's easy because what has happened. For example, as we saw in the graph, we realized that in terms of prices of metals, between January and then April, there was a big dip, and then it picked up again. Very clear. And then why did that happen? And it was very clear. All we said, which was very clear, was that China had then recovered from the pandemic, and we realized that they are the largest consumers of some of our products. And now that it started picking, the demand was coming up, and therefore we could see that reflected in the price. Yes, that's fine. Then the other question is that, How then do we then predict what can happen? Will that growth, will that trend, that trajectory, will it be sustained or will drop? So that's where we have to look at how then do we build insights? How then do we glean or pick what light from, because insight is picking light from information, all the information that we have. How then do we be able to connect them and help us predict what could possibly happen in the future? Will this trend continue? Will there be a dip? If China should have issues, if demand from China go down, or disruption in South Africa, South America, there were disruptions, along the lines. There were also other issues over there. There were disruptions in terms of their production, and therefore there was some sort of demand, because it was demand for some of these products, because once supply was also down from that end. Obviously, if supply is down and demand is going up, of course, we would expect increases in prices. So there are disruptions in supply in Southern America. China was then picking up. So you look at all these factors, all these dots, and see how it can help you in your future prediction, so that maybe you are a bit careful and not invest heavily, and in the end it comes back to bite you or affect you. So I think that we have so much data. It's good. We can describe what happens. We can even tell why it did happen, but then we should spend more resources in terms of getting insights of what could possibly happen, being able to predict. And then also, once we have the insights, then it gives us that foresight to see what will also happen. So it is said that if you want to be better prepared to deal with issues in the future, it's important that you don't lose sight of hindsight, know what happened. Also, make sure that you can pick insights, pick some lights from the information. And then lastly, that we believe will help you be able to foresee what will happen. You have that foresight to deal with any issues if they should come. And you'll be amazed that when there are issues, because you have these structures in place, you'll be better prepared to be able to deal with them or handle them should they arise. Now, these are some of the firms that are embracing digitalization: Gold Corp, Freeport, Anglo-American, just a few along the value chain. Some is exploration, picking data from the surface. Others, yes, they use drones to monitor rock slope and all that. When it comes to safety issues, some for drilling. So it goes on and on. So it depends on which one. Others even use smart cap. So what the people wear, it can pick some vitals in terms of the conditioning of their body. And then when there are issues in terms of temperature, you can easily pick. And if someone has a condition, at least you could save lives here and there. So I think that every mind is different, but we can't lose sight of the fact that digitalization has come to stay. We should look at our present situation and see how we can more or less invest in that area to complement the work of staff or employees, so that at least we can maintain or even go beyond our production levels. And then the other bit is, how do we also collaborate, man and machines? It's always a big fight. What role do we have to play, man and machines? Machines should perform their land analysis for us because the data is huge. They have the computation capacity. We don't have that. They should come out with the patterns between numbers, pattern between data. They should come with it. And ours is to take those patterns and then make decisions. So each person has their role to play. We make sense out of the output they give us. So without them, we cannot be good at predicting the future. Once we have them, at least we can't predict 100%, but to a very large extent, we'll be better placed to deal with issues when they come our way. So we are to collaborate with machines. We are not supposed to fight with them in any way and say that they are taking over our jobs. So that is very, very important if we can look at it that way. So the other bit is accelerating innovation. It's also absolutely vital. Accelerating innovation we talked about, so especially for exploration. Now I know that, like we have said, we have declining ores. Ores are declining. We have declining ores, like we said, and then accessibility will be an issue. So we need as a matter of urgency to see how we can more or less take advantage of some of these tools that are around, the drones, and just to ensure that at least we can lower. Okay, so we can use some of these tools in terms of exploration. You know, now there are a lot of them around that could help us pick data and analyze them. And then also, you know, mining, one of the big things about mining is that it's asset heavy. It's asset heavy. Yeah, you have a lot of machines on site. It's asset heavy, a lot of machines on site. And for that matter, how do we ensure that through engineering, these machines can collaborate? I could be in the office, and then as we are hauling materials, data, because I have an instrument that can pick data in terms of number of trips, condition of these vehicles. I don't need to be there to write it when I see a vehicle. I mean, I pick it at a central point, and it's fed into a system, and reports are generated, and management can see it and then take a decision. They can see which assets are idle, which asset needs some sort of maintenance. I mean, we could, depend on every mine, we have our own set of situation we can easily deal with them. The other one is tools to improve their safety, employee safety. There are a lot of them. I mean, there are tools that will check, I mean, in terms of rock stability. I mean, just to ensure that there's some promptings before these things happen. And then also, it's a big thing now, impact on the environment as well. What are the tools that can help us minimize what we do in terms of the impact on the environment, reduce our greenhouse gases, and then all that, just to ensure that we have that social license to operate, and then we're not going to have a lot of issues that we are the ones destroying the environment and then all that. So by and large, what I'll say is that yes, COVID-19 has caused a lot of disruptions. We can't run away from that. A lot of disruptions. It has affected lives. It has affected livelihoods. But I think that it should be seen as a platform. It shouldn't be seen, yes, it's not all lost. It should be seen as a platform or an accelerator of change. All the things we want to do, how we want to improve our operations, how we want to ensure that we reduce costs, or enhance employee safety. This is a time to sit back and say that, well, yes, it has happened. We were a bit spared to a large extent. What if the worst happens? Are we going to be in a better position to deal with the issues should they arise? So I think that we should see it as a platform to see how we can improve and then make some cost savings, gain efficiency, and also improve safety. As we all know, safety is very key when it comes to mining. And I believe that if we do this as an industry, we'll be future ready to deal with some of these eventualities should they happen. So thank you very much for your time and for your attention.